Huge changes are on the way as a much more colder setup starts to take shape as we head into January. So let's take a look of how this is going to play out going forward. This is our holiday snowstorm that we've been highlighting on this channel for the past couple of days. We had a low pressure center that came off the west coast that brought all the heavier rains across portions of California into Arizona, and then all that transferred to some snow across the higher elevations of New Mexico into the Rockies. We also had a cold front that came up here into the northwest. As those low pressures are going to phase, that blows up a pretty significant snowstorm for your holiday time frame, Christmas time frame, across the Dakotas, through portions of Nebraska, as well as into Kansas. That will be a pretty significant snowstorm. Some of these areas could pick up 12 to 18 inches of heavy snowfall. But out ahead of that, there's your warm sector. This is the rain sector. This is the warm air, the warm front that's literally lifting from all the way down to the coast, all the way to Canada, folks. We could have record highs ahead of this pretty significant cold blast for Christmas time frame. And we could be picking up some pretty heavy rains. This is around a ½ inch at least. The probabilities are 100%. All these areas highlighted in red here could at least see at least a ½ inch of rainfall. Some of these areas could pick up 1, 2, possibly 3 inches of heavy rainfall ahead of the cold front. And this is where your cold front will lie for Christmas Day. So if you live to the west of there, you're feeling the effects. You're feeling every bit of like, hey, it's Christmas time. But if you live to the east of there, there's the warm sector. That's where all the heavier rain will be. And then that's where all the higher temperatures will be as well. And it definitely won't be feeling like Christmas. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button. If you're in, you get all my daily content on this channel. And I've literally done over 1,300 videos on this channel. So I put out a lot of content, folks. So I'm here all year long to keep you well ahead of the storm. So let's really delve into this, folks, because we highlighted this the past couple of weeks on my December outlook. We talked about the EPO, which is your East Pacific Oscillation, starting to trend negative as we headed towards that Christmas time frame, heading into that Christmas week. There's Christmas on a Monday this year. There's the 25th. You see it positive. Whenever it's positive, you get the higher temperatures across the central and eastern 2/3, but you've got the cold front. That cold front will be the transitional stage as a much colder setup enters the picture as we head into January, because we've got the teleconnection starting to trend negative during next week, during that Christmas week time frame from that Monday through that Saturday. You can definitely see the trend starting to turn negative. The more negative it gets, the colder air is going to be into the central and eastern 2/3 of the US. An extension on the EPO guidance, this takes it negative all the way through around the 7th or 8th time frame. But look, it actually tries to trend back towards positive again, or at least neutral, you know, as we get towards that 7th or 8th time frame. And the GFS ensembles are kind of implying the same thing. So right here's Christmas time around the 25th. It starts to trend negative towards that into that Christmas week time frame. But this one's a little bit even more significant. It actually drops it even further negative, but still the mean trends it more positive right around that same time frame. So at least right now, we're looking for a pocket, a window of colder air going to be entering the US, and especially trend much colder as we head into those first 7 or 8 days of January. So that's pretty confident that is going to happen, especially into the central and eastern 2/3. It all stems from that polar vortex stretching type of event that we talked about that starts during that Christmas week time frame, but then transitions to much colder setup as the EPO goes even more negative heading into those first 7 or 8 days of January. Now, this is a stretching event. We've had 2 of them already. Last winter we had 7. A stretching event, it is what it is, right? There's a short window of colder air, just like we had a short window of colder air across into the Halloween time frame as well as into the Thanksgiving time frame. And that's what we're calling for right now, a short window, likely 7 to 10 days, possibly a much colder air to funnel in to the US right around between into the 7th and 10th of January. Now, what would take it even potentially more significant than what I'm calling for right now is if you head up into the stratosphere, we're talking way up there, that's 20 miles up in the atmosphere, we start to look at these zonal winds, right? And we're looking at the ensemble member of the EPS guidance. Look at this, folks. This would have 27 out of the 51 members of the EPS going negative. That's about 50%, right? So for my standards, if it's not at least 40%, the probability of it happening are not very good. But when you're looking at 51, over 50% of the ensembles members say, hey, this could possibly be a much more significant event than what I'm actually calling for. So right now, I'm just calling for more of a stretching event. But if this thing does actually go more negative than what these zonal winds are implying, this could be more of a split or a displacement in the polar vortex. That would be an even longer duration cold spell into the US. So let's break this thing down for you. This is the next 5 days. This is the time frame from that Christmas time frame through that 30th time frame to end December. So we're already seeing the cold front that will be moving across the plains into the southern plains on Christmas Day, and that will continue to shift west to east. And as it does, the ridge over the top will start to retrograde, will start to retreat further and further north, allowing that colder air to funnel into the US. So to end December, your coldest anomalies are going to be south across the southern plains and into the southeast areas. This is where the precipitation will be. So I showed you the snow. Here's the precipitation as we go from that Christmas to end December, as that cold front will drop. On the backside, you got drier air entering on the backside. Out ahead of it, you still have the precipitation from that 26th through that 30th time frame that will be highlighted over Florida and into the Carolinas, through the Ohio Valley, and there's most of that will be in the form of snow here in the Dakotas, but then transfer over into just kind of a rainy type setup with some type of lake effect snows that's left over from this event. So there's the snow, there's the significant holiday snowstorm across the Dakotas through Nebraska into Kansas. Then as this shifts westbound, you got the eastbound, you got the higher anomalies over the top, right? So not much colder air that falls into this area. So you get left over just kind of sporadic snow showers and some lake effect snow. But as we transfer into January, right? So this is a look on the 500 millibar, your height anomalies. It takes on much more of a colder look. So you got the first initial push of colder air. Then as we transfer into this New Year's Eve, around the 5th time frame of January, we start to see, right, the ridge retrograde even higher, right? The further it highlights going back up into Canada and over into Alaska, you're going to be able to allow this colder air. There's the EPO setting up shop across west of Alaska. That was on the EPS. This is the GFS ensembles. Remember, even it takes it more negative. The EPO is even more pronounced, bringing in the colder air faster underneath. Remember, we're in an El Nino type setup, so you get the much more active subtropical jet underneath. You got the polar jet not as active. That's why you're seeing the extreme temperatures over the top into Canada, across the northern tier of the US, because we're in an El Nino, right? So, but here's the jet stream, right? So as the EPO goes negative, as the teleconnections go negative, and we start to feel the effects of that polar vortex stretching event, there's the subtropical jet dipping a little further southbound. So there's the colder air funneling in from the north. we got the low pressure, we got the negative EPO west of Alaska here. That puts the colder air further south, and you have the much more active subtropical jet. So you have that dry slot behind that cold front, but then it takes time, right? You got to moisten up the atmosphere again. And by the time we hit those first couple of days of January, these areas are going to be moistened up again, tapping into this much more active subtropical jet, as this will be swinging from west to east, falling into that colder air. So there's the temperature anomalies, right? So it gets colder push, you get the much more elongation of the negative EPO, the polar vortex stretching type of event, puts the colder anomalies across the south, especially across the Carolinas into the southeast. There's your ridge retrograding even further up, further north, right? The higher we can get this ridge over the top, the much more pronounced this colder air will be. And the ensemble guidance is even, the GFS is even, like I mentioned, even more bullish than what the EPS is calling for right now. There's a greater negative EPO that would put the colder anomalies across a good part of the lower 48 going into that first week of January 3rd through that 8th time frame. And if it does, with the lower jet stream, it could possibly lower the storm track a little bit further south. So this is what the EPS is calling for right now during that first week of January, highlighting a snowstorm that could take place across New Mexico, goes across portions of the panhandle of Texas, that would scream through portions of Missouri, through Illinois, through Indiana, portions of Ohio, and eventually head up into the mid-Atlantic as well as into the Northeast. But when you're talking this far out, you always look at like probabilities, right? You're going to get these crazy runs every now and then on the model runs that run every 4 to 6 hours, but you look at more of an ensemble look looking this far out, and then you look at more of a probability outlook this far out. But if we take a look at that through that first week of January, we see where the red is. That's where 100% you could possibly see snow with this setup going into that first week. But look how far south the jet stream does drop, and some of these, you want to likely see areas that are over 40%, right? So once you get into this, lighter green and yellow shaded areas, that's where you're possibly going to see a more probable event of seeing at least some snow going into that first week of January. Once you get into that 20%, that 10%, the anomalies are just not as significant, and the odds of it snowing there are just not very good, right? So, but if we continue the extension and we continue through that January 10th timeframe as what the polar vortex is calling for right now during that stretching event, and the EPO going negative, that would be the snow track, at least right now on the extension on the EPS guidance. The only unknown would be beyond this period. It's a do we get that January thaw? Does it start to retreat and get kind of a warmer setup? Or does the much more zonal winds, the negative winds that are coming from the stratosphere, more than 50% of the members are calling right now, does it continue and turn into a much more significant event beyond the 10th time frame? It's just too much uncertainty to talk about right now. So right now we're basically calling for a transition to colder setup during that Christmas week time frame. Then especially those first 10 days of January are predominantly going to be colder setup across the lower 48, and that's where you could have some snow opportunities, at least further south and east as well. The uncertainty is beyond that 10th time frame. Do we start to warm up in more of a January thaw period, or do we transfer even colder as the zonal winds go further south? So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.